Hi, my name is Irving Jones. I'm also known as Karamo Mature Suleiman. I'm in charge of a strange political organization, an organization that fights for the working class. It's entitled the Communist Party of the United States of America, the Eastern PA and Delaware District. The thing that is important, and the thing that's very important for everyone to understand in terms of polemics of the working class, is that the struggle for the working class is the struggle for humanity. It's a struggle for education for humanity. It's a struggle for jobs for humanity. It's a struggle for the average person in humanity. It's a struggle for humanity itself. It's a struggle for the planet. It's a struggle to prevent climate change. It's a struggle for our world. It's a struggle for life. We have several speakers here today. I am, of course, one of them. The first, and we'll go in order, we'll go with Bob. Bob is important because he's in charge of the Brandywine Peace, the Brandywine
community.
Peace movement. And I met Bob. Now, Bob's an interesting person in terms of peace. He stood out there and fought Lockheed Martin for so long, and we've all gone back and forth to the jail, that he's become somewhat not only famous, but somewhat staunch and stalwart in his struggle for peace, in his struggle for humanity. Bob, I'm going to let you explain it because you can probably do a better job than I can.
Well, that was very sweet, Irving. It's been a pleasure over the years. Well, the Brandywine Peace community is approaching its 49th birthday, nearly 50 years old, and we were founded in the immediate wake of the Vietnam War by a group of Vietnam War resistors, all of whom had jail experience in terms of resisting the war. And that's what we've continued to do. We've created basically 5 decades of nonviolent direct action resistance. I think it would be safe to say, as one peace studies professor described Brandywine as a pageant, the greatest pageant of direct action protest in U.S. history. I say that with all humility. My understanding in terms of what I was to speak to has to do with voting. For nearly 5 decades now, Brandywine has conducted repeated nonviolent direct action campaigns, but has never been involved in an electoral campaign. Basically, it's as simple as this: we believe that if voting would change anything, it would be illegal, and so we set our eyes and our souls on nonviolent direct action. This year is different. In fact, the election of Donald J. Trump, everything changed. It's all different. We couldn't ignore the fact that Donald J. Trump was the issue. It wasn't the Republican Party. It was Donald J. Trump. And that picture of fascism, and I say that with the greatest sorrow, was before us. And that we could no longer avoid the issue and the matter of electoral politics. Which is not to say that we will or have endorsed any candidate. What we are doing and what we've been doing is a campaign called Oust Trump Vote, which began here in Germantown with shout outs and bell tollings every Saturday, began this past June, and continues. And it has expanded to other demonstrations. What we have sought to do is to approach voting as an act of resistance. You know, after the installation of Donald J. Trump nearly 8 years ago, 4 years ago, there was all this talk of the resistance. Resistance still lies in direct action, still lies with the people. That is resistance, what comes from the people. And so what we are doing now, and for at least the next few months, is to approach the issue of the election as a matter of resistance, to approach the vote as an act of resistance to Donald J. Trump, who is right now the world's greatest purveyor or weapon of mass destruction.
Very much. And John, and Bob, that's true. You got a man that basically can stand to see the support of a group of 40 men who almost beat a protest to the death. He can stand to see another woman run over by a car, and repeated run-overings by cars and attacks by vehicles. And not once has he said, this is wrong. This is not what I will stand for. This is not what my administration will stand for. And for some reason, elements of the Ku Klux Klan, he can sit up there and say, well, there's some mighty good people in that. But we got our hopes up, and we're going to defeat him. And everybody has to come out and vote, voting for peace and voting for humanity. The next person is from Granny Peace Brigade. And you want to take it?
I'm Jean Haskell from the Granny Peace Brigade, Philadelphia. We are a whole lot younger than Bob. We are only 14 years old. We formed when George Bush was threatening to invade Iraq, and we said, we've got to do something. So 11 grannies went to the recruiting center and said, take us. We've lived our lives. We don't want our grandchildren to come home in body bags. Well, we were arrested for defiant trespassing, but the judge dismissed the case and said they weren't defiant and they weren't trespassing. But since then, we have lobbied, advocated, demonstrated, resisted, as Bob says, for peace. This year, too, we are working hard to get rid of Donald Trump. We see him as a huge threat. We see him as ready to go to war in a minute. He talks about using nuclear weapons. Well, let's try this one. It's kind of small. Let's see what happens to it. Well, we're not going to have that. On Peace Day, which was, I guess, 2 weeks ago in September, we hung up a clothesline, which is something old-fashioned grandmothers used to do. We hung it up and we told people that in 2019, taxpayers in Philadelphia paid $196 billion to support the military budget in this country. And we said, here's what these tax dollars could buy instead. That could buy 22,000 elementary school teachers, 34,000 scholarships for college students, 135, almost 136,000 monthly relief payments of $1,200, and adults receiving health care for 1 year, 500,000. So there are many, many things, and we urge people to write to Congress, write to their senators, and ask them to buy peace, not war. So we're advocating. Congresswoman Barbara Lee has introduced a resolution, number 1003, to defund the Pentagon budget by 10%. So we're asking people to support that resolution. And we are telling people that the vote is the most important. We must vote in Democratic senators who will not support Trump's agenda. And we have to vote in a Democratic president who will take a really thoughtful, peaceful, considered approach to the concepts of war and peace. So too with Bob, I mean, the answer now to whether we have a democracy or whether we have a fascist government is getting out the vote. And so we hope everybody will be either mailing in a vote or mailing in a ballot or going to the polls. Thank you.
I want to add that it's a tragedy when we have $3 billion that buys a destroyer and $13 billion for aircraft carrier, and you can get 3 years of Des Moines city budget for the price of the destroyer, and 13 years for the price of the aircraft carrier. And it's a tragedy of what we're doing here with the money. We could spend so much with the money and do so much with the money.
It sure is.
Thanks, G. Next on the agenda is Rich Gardner. Is he here? Rich? Okay, we'll move right on. Violetta is here. Okay, we'll move right on. And we'll take it from here. I'll talk about my organization. I'm sort of wearing two hats. And I'm wearing two hats today. I am the chairperson of the Philadelphia chapter of the National Writers Union. And I'm also the chairperson for the Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware Communist Party of the United States of America. We refer to ourselves as CPPA. We're part of the larger organization, the Communist Party of the United States of America, chaired by Rosita Cambron and Joe Sims. But I have the eastern section of the state of Pennsylvania, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to explain that hat to you. I'm responsible for actually organizing the party, building the membership of the party, and ensuring that the working class has a party to speak for its own needs. What are those needs? Those needs are affordable and decent health care. Those needs are education. Those needs are housing. Those needs are really peace and a better life here in the United States. Those needs encompass a better environment, a way of fighting for the ecology. That's what those needs are about. And when it becomes a situation, and we have our paper, the People's World.org, and that's on the internet, and it takes a position, and that's the position of humanity. It's the position of the working class. And we're biased about that. And we have no bones about it. And we want to see a better world for every human being. Some of the things we've been able to celebrate, this is our 101st anniversary. We celebrate our 100th anniversary as a communist party here in the United States. We are allied with our sister parties here in the sister party of the Communist Party of China, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, the Communist Party of Cuba. and all of the communist and workers' parties throughout the world, in the world communist movement, to struggle not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. Finally, I am a smaller person. I'm also chair of the National Writers Union. We are a union of freelance writers formed years ago in 1981 by several prominent writers. The late Toni Morrison was one of them. The late Ursula Le Guin was also one of them. And the attitude was this: why should the working person that writes starve? Why should he go month after month, year after year, without a paycheck? Why should he have no place to grieve? Why should he be without a union, without protection? Why can't we all make a decent living and pay the writer? And that's what we technically are about. We fight for contracts and for the money for the writers. And so many times writers are sometimes not even paid for their work. And we have to actually take it to grievance and bring the person to court and make the person pay the writer and give them a decent check. Also, we try to ensure that writers have a place to actually ply their trade. Poetry, as well as short stories, as well as freelance fiction and nonfiction work, and ensure that each and every, in academics, literary, and every genre, whether it's science fiction, whether it's Western, whether it's romance, whatever their genre, they're paid. And we also encourage writers from music and composition as well. If you put it in print, you put it on paper, or if you put it on the internet, we look out for you. And we encourage our membership, and we encourage the growth of our membership. And I don't think we've done too bad since 1981. In fact, we are continuing to struggle for the writer. Thank you. The next one, do we have Joe?
You do?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I was recruited by Ken Hurd for this panel, and I'm here also wearing two hats. I represent the U.S. Peace Council, which is an affiliate of the World Peace Council. I'm based in New York, by the way, and also I represent a new coalition which calls itself Move the Money for Human Needs. It's a little bit of an awkward phrase, but I'll explain it in a minute. It's got a website, which I urge people to take a look at, moneyforhumanneeds.org, moneyforhumanneeds.org. And it's got a rich assortment of articles and graphs and charts on what to me is the 800-pound gorilla in the room that is not being discussed by this election campaign by either party, and that is the $740 billion Pentagon budget. I think maybe although with profound respect for the other people who have voiced their basic outlook, and I share the revulsion of Trump toward Trump, but I think realism requires me to say that the Democrats, while they're better on domestic policy by a long shot, in many cases, on foreign policy, and matters of war and peace, they're not so good. They're not a whole lot different. Every year, the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership sign off on a $700 billion plus military spending. bill. They may disagree over decimal points, but basically there's a fundamental agreement. If you look, let's say Joe Biden is our next president, something I would certainly welcome, but compared to the other alternative. But you look at his foreign policy team, some of the most hawkish people in Washington are on it, advising him, and it's scary. In fact, Bernie Sanders has been saying this publicly. So I think we need to be realistic as peace activists that we've got a real problem if Trump wins. We're going to have a problem if Biden wins too. And I accept the argument that we might have a better chance of pressuring him, but we're going to have to pressure him. And so with that in mind, I want to talk about our new campaign, which has evolved over the summer, which is called moneyforhumanneeds.org, that's the website where you can learn all about it. And what we're doing is encouraging committees at a local level. And Ken Hurd is trying to get this going in Philadelphia to get a resolution through the city council which calls upon the Congress members in that city, in the city of Philadelphia, to demand that they reduce the military budget and redirect money wasted on the Pentagon to the things that we really need: healthcare, education, and so forth. Spending colossal sums on a bloated Pentagon budget and endless wars was always crazy. But in conditions of mass unemployment and fiscal crisis and a historic uprising against racial injustice, which is crying out for new political priorities, such Pentagon spending is more insane than ever. There is a sign of hope. We're just beginning to get this going at a grassroots level around the country, but the better members of Congress, among them Barbara Lee, who has already been mentioned, who has a long and honorable record on war and peace, and also Representative Mark Pocan, have started to challenge runaway military spending. Over the summer, they managed to get 93 members of the House, which is a new development, to vote to cut the Pentagon budget by 10%. It was not a huge cut. And true, it was not enough to prevail, but it was a beginning, and we take hope from that. I think in the last analysis, it's not going to be moral nobility or listening to the appeals of the peace movement, but simple economic reality that's going to force realism on Congress, which has not been willing to deal with this realistically. In my town, New York City, 22,000 municipal workers are facing layoffs. Just a few months ago, they were hailed as courageous heroes of the pandemic, and the mayor and the governor couldn't say enough nice things about them, and now they're getting a pink slip. So the choice facing us either is austerity or taking a look at the military budget and taking the waste and the fraud and the abuse and all of those billions of dollars and putting them where we need it. So we need to build at the grassroots. Philadelphia is an important city. In your state, we have an excellent campaign going out in Pittsburgh, which is led by a number of religious leaders, as a matter of fact, and other progressive people, peace activists. So your state's a very important state. It's a swing state. Everyone's talking about trends there. So I urge the people of Philadelphia to, and I'm sure Ken will, when he gets a chance to talk to you about it, will raise it too. It's something we can do now, looking beyond the election to redirecting our country toward a sane future where we spend money on things that we need rather than on these insane weapons of war. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ken was one of the ones that encouraged the NWU, as well as several members in the Communist Party, about the U.S. Peace Council. And it is a very, very, very active group. and a very, very hard struggler for peace. I wanted to take a few moments to talk about Ken. Ken hides behind the backlight sometimes. I mean, he goes in the back and he hides, and he pretends like he doesn't do too much. That's his secret weapon, I always thought. He is the treasurer of the National Writers Union's Philadelphia chapter, and he's been there for quite some time. He's also in charge of the organizing. He ensures that the National Writers Union's, the Philadelphia chapter, is actually active in as many things in terms of peace, in terms of education, in terms of health, and in terms of any aspect of the working class. But it just doesn't stop here. Ken actually actively participates in the marches. He's been active in Black Lives Matter and in every march that they can possibly have for either children, for education, and for peace. In addition to that, he sits on the district committee, which is the district committee for the Communist Party of the Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware, which is the equivalent of the Central Committee. And he sits there, and he actually is very, very active and works hard for the Communist Party, and a very, very stalwart believer in scientific socialism, Marxism, and Leninism. We have another person who's just joined our studio, Richmond Gardner. And Rich, I want you to take it over from here and explain what you do.
I do a lot of technical behind-the-scenes stuff for this. I do a blog and keep that up. The thing that I was concerned about, that I wanted to talk about, was the allegations of voter fraud that we're constantly getting from the president. Voter fraud is something that the president charged people with immediately after he entered office. He said, "Oh, I would have won, millions of votes, but they were all illegal." In New Hampshire, you had the problem of people could vote without changing their driver's licenses because they were students, because they didn't have to change their Iowa driver's licenses to New Hampshire licenses to vote. So people use that, the Voter Fraud Commission used that as evidence, people committing voter fraud. No, they weren't committing fraud at all. My concern is that the president will use accusations of voter fraud to explain why he lost the election by tens of millions of votes. So I think we're going to have to look for this.
Turn it. Ken, there you go. You ready? I see it here.
There's a sort of vague, fuzzy guy in the middle.
As soon as we get Ken back on, we'll start with Ken Hurd. Okay. like I said, both Violetta and Ken sit on the district committee of the Communist Party of the Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware Party district. The thing is, they have been very, very active and very, very, very vocal in the party. But even more so, and I had failed to mention that we do have a Facebook page, and I think I mentioned that before. And it's just go on the box in the Facebook space box and type in Communist Party, Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware, and you should bring you up to a wonderful page. In fact, we had a recent article basically stating that only the working class has the power in the United States to determine who the president of the United States. They do it by vote and because of the U.S. Constitution. And only that is the only power. And Donald Trump and no one else has the right to sit in that office unless he has been duly elected. Ken, are you ready? Here he is. He's coming. I'll even take Violetta. Oh, that's Diane. Diane, are you ready? Diane Lackey, are you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Now
you.
we can.
Okay. Well, I'm ready.
All right, go ahead.
I think I see Bob. Is that your Bob? I can't hear you.
Yeah, you're on. I can hear you.
Myself?
No.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Lang. Everyone can hear me? I am a retired manager, formerly with the Office of Intellectual Disability Services. I'm raising grandchildren, and I'm a community volunteer, just trying to help our neighbors vote, participate in this election.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell us about the BRC or do we want to move on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Tell us about the Black Radical Congress.
Can you hear me? You can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Feedback. Is that you, Bob?
No, it's me. It's Karamo.
Gentlemen. Who's in the gray?
Yeah, that's Bob. Bob's there.
Oh, that's okay.
Bob's there.
All right. If you have questions, Karamo, ask them.
Okay. About the only question I have is what is the U.S. Peace Council doing to stop to end U.S. bases worldwide, in particular AFRICOM? What are you doing to try to close the bases there in Africa and throughout the world?
Is that directed to me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We in the last year and a half, we've organized two conferences, one in Baltimore and then one in Dublin, Ireland, involving a lot of European and African peace activists to on this question of NATO bases and U.S. NATO bases, of which there are about 1,000. Moreover, we've recently, in the last year, Ajamu Baraka, who's the head of the Black Alliance for Peace, has joined our executive board and has been consistently raising the question of AFRICOM. And in the last several weeks, you probably, if you get as much email traffic from the anti-war movement as I do, you've probably seen a lot of press releases about AFRICOM. They are striving to make it a mass issue in the African American community, and it's a kind of an educational task, exposing how the U.S. uses these military bases as a way of controlling African states. Is part of a big part of the work they do. But they've been raising the profile of AFRICOM. I think it's still in its early stages. And as I said earlier, getting a discussion about foreign policy in general just isn't happening in this election. Only a few members of Congress, the better ones, such as Barbara Lee or such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or are raising some of these issues that people like us care about. But we're trying to highlight it as much as we can. It's outrageous what the U.S. does. It's outrageous what a non-issue the 800 U.S. bases and the 200 other NATO bases are. If we discuss every damn thing in that ridiculous so-called debate the other night, the most ridiculous things in the world were discussed or shouted or screamed, but not the existential issue of, for example, Trump has been dismantling every single arms agreement that was achieved in the period certainly in the period of détente, or even in subsequent decades. It's not even mentioned, and yet the whole survival of humanity depends on it. The climate crisis wasn't even mentioned. So AFRICOM is a case of another utterly important issue for hundreds of millions of people that isn't mentioned. So we're just going to continue to agitate on that. And the U.S. Peace Council is not like a lot of peace organizations are. They do very good work, but they're kind of run by humanitarian people, liberals. We have a different political framework. We understand that the reason war comes about is imperialism. And imperialism does not just mean a nasty, aggressive foreign policy. Imperialism is a system of giant corporations that dominate governments, and imperialist war is the reason world wars break out. And it's the reason the U.S. has 800 military bases of its own and a 3 million man permanent army and all the rest. So our outlook, we think, gives us a leg up on other organizations that approach this from a purely humanitarian, valuable though their work is, from purely humanitarian or from a pacifist perspective. Though there are a lot of organizations that are led by such groups, and as I said, they do valuable work. But sometimes you need an anti-imperialist outlook in order to understand the evil that you're up against. And so we're just going to keep at it with respect to AFRICOM and similar issues.
How many troops are basically stationed in overseas on these bases? Do you have an estimate?
Well, in the case of Africa, I do know one thing, which is that it's very hard to estimate. And I was at a seminar at the European conference, which discussed this. And in the case of AFRICOM, what the U.S. does, along with its NATO allies, France and Britain especially, is that when there's a hotspot or when there's some government that's threatening U.S. corporate interests, it takes troops out of its German bases and its Italian bases and flies them in to do the dirty deed, regime change of one type or another, or preemptive regime change, and then flies them back. So there is not a large number of U.S. troops permanently stationed on the ground in Africa, but that doesn't mean the U.S. can't intervene a lot, and it does.
And don't forget the drones.
And the drone. Right.
Which every AFRICOM related base in Africa can fly drones out of.
Right.
The Brandywine Peace Community has conducted a campaign to close the Horsham Air National Guard site, which operates a remote drone command center. We've been doing that, conducting that campaign since the drone operation was announced in 2013. And it is one and of the sites that can navigate drones from base in Africa or the Middle East from the United States and direct its missiles to a site. So AFRICOM drones are essential to the U.S. military presence in Africa, dominating presence. I would just like to say, if I may, Karamo, that our underlying focus in terms of this election period, and we will return to nonviolent direct action in the coming year. We will return to that. We have to return to that because right now what we're saying is topple Trump to push Biden. We are not supporting any candidate in our campaign to topple Trump, to oust Trump. But when we're talking about Trump, we're not talking about another candidate. We're talking about a whole sociopathology of policy, of racism, of fascism, which is another word for sociopathology. So I think that peace activists need to approach this period in the next few months. And we probably are going to be talking about, as some of us have been training to do, to resist a coup. What a coup is a power grab. I mean, he's announced it repeatedly that he will not abide by the constitutional requirement for a peaceful transition of power. He's announced that. He has said it repeatedly. Gangsters don't leave. And he has modeled his approach basically on that of the mob. That is what he has done. We have a hard time saying that because it doesn't fit into our constitutional understanding. But he has modeled himself on the mob. Gangsters don't leave. They have to be removed.
I agree.
And so, again, the emphasis must be topple Trump to push Biden. Biden is awful in terms of the issue of nuclear weapons. He's one of the architects of the drone war. He's right behind Lockheed Martin and all the rest of the war profiteers here in the Delaware Valley and around the country, etc. But the issue is not Joe Biden. The issue is Donald Trump and the sociopathology of racism, of white supremacy, and of fascism. That is what the issue is in terms of Donald Trump. And that is why we insist, our banner reads up in, that we've had out all over the place, oust Trump, vote. And underlying that is topple Trump to push Biden.
I will reinforce that. I mean, I don't know if you can hear me. We all know that once Joe Biden gets in office, and hopefully he does, he's going to have to be pushed in a million different directions. Climate change, peace, the Pentagon budget, on and on and on. And so we have a lot of work cut out for us in the coming years. No question about that, Joe. I totally agree with you and Bob and all of these issues.
We have to make it to the coming years, though.
Anyone else, Rich?
I would say that Biden does not clearly and specifically support the Green New Deal. He said he disagrees with some particulars, but he very clearly is going to go in that direction. He very clearly is going to help rather than hurt. So, yes, throw out Trump, then work on Biden.
I think. Thank you, Rich.
But we've got to get a Democratic Senate in. Otherwise, our goose is cooked, frankly.
I cannot overemphasize the struggle we're in for in the coming months, in the next few months. It's going to get rough, folks. It's going to get rough. Trump and his culture, his gang, his mob is out to steal an election and to make the election him. I must say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. As someone who has spent 7 of his 50 years in prison for acts of nonviolent resistance, I am afraid. But we need to overcome that fear with a hope and a nonviolent resistance in which people are being trained now all around the country. Last night, there was a call of 900 people with George Lakey, the master nonviolent trainer, legendary nonviolent trainer, who's here in Philadelphia, who's trained people around the world, from Thailand to Russia to Slovenia, various countries in Africa, in nonviolent resistance. And chief amongst it has been research into what will prevent a coup, and what, if that is unsuccessful, will remove the coup from its function. I really want to emphasize that people look into that. Go to Democracy Now. Go to choosedemocracy.org. Please look into it. And you can always go to the Brandywine Peace Community for all of this stuff. www.brandywinepeace.com. We have to topple Trump. We have to oust Trump so that we have the very hope of stopping Joe Biden, of pushing vote Joe Biden, I mean.
I think it's choose-democracy.us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's
one thing.
Thank you,
Just to finish up on what I was saying before. The president has made a number of accusations of voter fraud. Millions and millions of people are voting when they should not be voting there when they're not authorized to vote. My fear, my concern is that we'll have the election. Biden will win by millions and millions of votes, but Trump is going to jump up and say, aha, remember voter fraud. Remember that issue that I've been pushing for years and years. Voter fraud is a problem. Therefore, he's going to go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, guys, you have to decide for us, was this election legitimate? That's why he's pressing this person. Well, I think she has, 3 years experience of actually being a judge? She is way under experience, but she is
Catholic fundamentalist. She's wacko.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
And she supports a religious viewpoint that back during the first century would have gotten her burned at the stake. Pentecostalism is a heretical point of view. Both she and Sarah Palin, are Pentecostalists. Or she's not quite Pentecostalist, but she's from a Catholic religion that is descended from Pentecostalism. So yeah, she's like, there's no way she'd be even nominated under a reasonable president. But because the president needs her vote on the Supreme Court to push aside the vote of the American people, we've got a real problem there.
Can I ask folks to do one thing? Stop referring to him as the president. We need to stop that. The terminology of president with Trump should never have been applied. I just want to say, and to really back up what Rich just said. And you notice I'm not really talking about Lockheed Martin as I normally would be at a rally. I'm not talking about drones. That's a given. That's a given. What I am really trying to emphasize, one, right now, the importance of voting. The vote has to be overwhelming. That's the deterrent effect of the vote in terms of his promised power grab or coup. That's the first thing. The other is to be mindful of that there will be activity and that people are invited to get behind a nonviolent movement to take the election back, to stop a coup. A year ago, 6 months ago, saying that would have been bonkers. I would have been viewed as a bonker case. Bill Maher has been talking about it for 4 years, for the past 4 years, that he's not going to leave, as well as Michael Moore. And generally, we've been viewed as bonkers. In the past few months, with not only Trump's statements, but behavior and his dispatching of his truck, what does he call them? Truck Trumpers that have moved through cities in the Midwest, armed, etc. These are attempts to intimidate the vote. Thank God, I think in Philadelphia, we're rather safe. Don't count on it. we must get out the vote. It must be huge. It must be overwhelming in order to stop Trump initially, to deter Trump. And then we must be prepared to resist.
I fully agree. In fact, Trump during the debates, he asked the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. The thing is I fear that we will have to deal with that during this election process, if not during the election process, but after the election process.
Irv,
They might literally use the use of violence to intimidate voters at the polls and to intimidate the outcome of the election. What we faced is and probably he's already begun the process of suing those places that permit mail-in ballots and those states that permit mail-in ballots. I think he will take us to court to try to ensure that he has enough electoral votes. But the man will be so far behind that it'll look at the end, toward the end, he might even go to the coup or to the violence, because he probably won't even have that many electoral votes. But even if he does, and if it's close, he's going to sue one way or the other. And it's not going to be an easy thing. And so we've got to keep the thing so that we can ensure Biden gets in and that we have the momentum to demand what we've been demanding, which is a better life for workers here in the United States.
Just to add to that,
can I
Irving,
add one more thing here?
Yes, please.
I think, Irv, it's very important for young people and people who were perhaps disaffected by the loss of Bernie Sanders to get out and vote anyway, because their whole lives, their whole futures are at stake right now. And that's an important population. If you have people in your groups that you can convince to vote, even though they may not be very enthusiastic about it, that's going to be very important to do.
Thank you, Bob.
I can say that young people in Germantown have been coming out in large numbers for the past 2 months. I really do believe that they sense and realize the stakes.
I hope
It's
so.
their future. It's not ours. It's their future. And as one young person addressing our shout out last Saturday said, to what has been primarily an older group, thank God the past few shout outs have been largely or much more represented by younger folk. But young person who from Community App, which is a newly formed youth vote effort in Germantown, looked at us and said, you, Bob, you, Melissa, are going to have to follow us. And I said, take it away. Take it away. It's yours to take. Know where you're going.
What about increasing voter registration